Now, for our next speaker, we have to take our minds and move to a totally other continent. I'm very, very happy to have with us President Alfredo Palacio. And I must add a personal comment here, because I really say it's been a pleasure to have dialogue with President Palacio this entire year. I still remember very clearly our first conversation when I was in Tanzania. You were in Ecuador, and ever since, and it's been a joy. And I think there's really a number of things that are really special about President Palacio, much of it coming from his own history. Initially a doctor, a cardiologist, so it's not a wonder where the heart, the sensitivity to the heart comes from. Then the Minister of Health, Vice President of Ecuador, President of Ecuador. So really it's a fascinating history, and I think not a common history in terms of the road to leadership. And in that sense, I think really in so many ways you're bringing today perspectives of Latin America. So you have a big challenge, not just representing Ecuador, but also Latin America in this Congress, but also interesting perspectives on leadership. For example, the issue of biology is one of our running conversations, the influence in international relations. The topic for today's discussion with President Palacio is new perspectives on globalization, new international agreements, goals, regulation, and global citizenship. And I'm very much looking forward to having the perspectives of President Palacio here. It's a very big honor. So without further ado, I would ask us for, again, a very, very warm welcome for President Alfredo Palacio. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mark. If we have the PowerPoint ready at any time, I will start without it. My first words are a greeting and homage to Berlin, the city that Andreas Huyssen calls the text to be written, erased, and to be written endlessly. The city of the voids, of the race and turn of war, the city with a glorious history and obligated forgettings, the city of the grandeur and great contradictions, an intensity with architecture that identifies it, but full of symbols and codes that wave provocative semiotics, indecipherable, surreal, which first arrives to the heart and afterwards the understanding. Huyssen imposes obligated rhythms. He brings Italo-Calvino to our memory to delineate an invisible city with a prism of race and mist through which we may see and admire Berlin. He draws poetry from the bottom of black holes. In those black holes in which history is armed and disarmed, in the emergence of and the fall of the German states. Berlin, the capital of the reunification, represents a paradigm of peace of our times. Hence, the citizens of the world respect it and love it. It's a mirror city, a mirror of many cities, mirror of all the citizens of the nations of the world that universally dream with the conscientious tearing down of the invisible walls that still divide us, and with the illumination of all the voids in which life remains a mystery. The Berliners know more than anyone else that after the courage and boldness of tearing down walls, it's necessary to have an enormous dose of emotional intelligence to help heal the wounds left in the spaces previously occupied by walls, physical or metaphorical, visible or invisible walls. The globalization that today's world demands is unattainable so far, as the enormous visible and invisible walls persist on, aggressively spreading their dividing bricks. The world ought to reunite itself to tear down walls and fill in the voids, reduce the gaps, and heal the wounds. After all, voids, gaps, and wounds are nothing else but invisible walls struggling to keep imposing violence and injustice. To have? Keep going, please. Just pass. Go to the next one. All right. Poverty is an unsurmountable gap that still exists. The free trade agreement that globalization postulates is based on the competition of a rich nation with a poor nation. It's like a heavyweight entering the ring to fight with a lightweight. You may predict the results. The gap of disease is there and is still growing. A sick person cannot compete in a globalized world. The lack of education, science, and technology is another profound gap. People without education cannot compete, much less people without access to scientific research. They are incapable of competing with societies that have innovation and technological advances every day. There exists a void of international organisms which on one side predominantly promote speculative capital over the productive capital and labor. The other side, as a wall apart, is social protection, such as health and development programs. In this significant reunion, A World Without Walls, here in Berlin, I come to formulate before you a proposition to tear down these walls without provoking voids, wounds, or gaps. My proposition is a new world order in which a new fundamental axis will be biology. I come from Ecuador, a small country in the middle of the world. I speak for myself, but my voice could be that of the almost 400 million South Americans that live in 8 million square kilometers, where we own a quarter of the world's fresh water, have rich mineral wealth, energy, food, colossal mountains, sweet plains, endless deserts. We cross the equator to the north and reach the South Pole. We are bathed and nourished in the two largest oceans. Nevertheless, some of its regions are the realm of inequality, and it seems as if a wall separates us from the rest of the world and from the 21st century. A black hole in time and space. I have fought all of my life against injustice, as a physician, as a president of my country, but most importantly, as a citizen of the world and a man of my time. We still live the paradox of a wonderful world ruled by deplorable political practices. What could surpass the beautiful serenity of our blue planet, the multitude of sceneries of its lands, seas, skies, falls, rivers, trees, flowers, birds, whales, dolphins, life, diverse people, ingenious people, creator people? How could not a planet not be beautiful if this is the cradle of Michelangelo, Walt Whitman, Neruda, Beethoven, Bertolt Brecht, Stravinsky, Rubinstein, Wagner, Mandela, Marie Curie, Marlene Dietrich, Herta Müller, Rigoberta Menchú, and those other precious and beloved women that every one of us keep tenderly in the bottom of our hearts. In their eyes, we discover one day the secret life of our wonderful universe. There and then we learn that what makes this world beautiful and different is life, preserved, perpetuated, and celebrated by love. We easily come to the conclusion that the only way to preserve our planet is to preserve life. But today we should ask ourselves, who should preserve life in the name of life itself? Who represents the species? Who represents us, the nations of the world? It must be us, ourselves, all nations united. I have no doubt in my mind that the United Nations represents us. It was created with that purpose, with the purpose to preserve peace among human beings. However, we have not achieved peace, and life is still threatened by extreme levels of violence. A concealed form of violence is present in underdeveloped countries, in the form of poverty, sickness, and death from preventable and curable diseases. A biological map revealed a concealed form of violence against an immense number of children, women, and men of the poor nations of the world. Open forms of violence are still generalized practice around the world. Believe it or not, violence, war, armaments, terrorism, and nuclear weapons still remain as a very important issues on the rhetoric agenda of every summit, convention, or meeting after million years of evolution of the human intelligence. There is a clear link between open and concealed violence, because the flow of resources devoted to war and armaments are resources that the world does not use for health, education, and social development. This is a vicious policy that the world should have already corrected. Unfortunately, we cannot be too proud of the result of international organization during the 20th century. Nor am I certain that someone could find reasonable explanations that justify their failure. If a traveler from a distant galaxy stopped by our planet for a moment and observed our absurd and incomprehensible behavior, they would not consider us to be very intelligent beings. In our present day, the preservation of universal and individual principles is at play. International organizations are obligated to preserve peace, liberty, justice, equality, rights, and human dignity. In the same way, they are concerned with the economy, security, wealth, markets, jobs, and comfort. But today, above all, we must understand that life is at risk. Not only the survival of the species, but the life of our planet, which is the only form of life we know. I think the questions are, can the present international organisms face this imminent threat? Will the most powerful nations of the earth be the voice of all mankind? Can the poor families of the world sleep peacefully because the G20 has reunited? Can the voiceless trust that the air and the water are going to be safe again because the representatives are discussing their survival in a summit? Can the mother who takes care of her sick child be sure that the health organizations will provide the needed medication in time? Can the millions who are sick trust that their lives will be considered more valuable than the profits the medications produced? No. It is difficult for the voiceless on the other side of the abyss or behind the walls to find a legitimate space within the international organizations. Many times, threat surpasses the vocation and the limitations of rich nations, the public body, or the international treaties. Why have efforts we made to avoid violence in all of its forms not produced the results we're hoping for? Why has the United Nations, with all of its law, rules, with all of its branches, programs, and global agencies, not been able to correct a world so unbalanced, hostile, violent, and irreverent with life? If the United Nations has implemented the objectives and goals of the millennium that the planet should achieve by 2015, why can they not fulfill them? Why have the multilateral organisms, funds, and implemented mechanisms to control sickness and protect health been capable to eradicate all ailments, but now multiple new plagues exist, and an entire village of young people continue to die? Why does the ghost of war continue to blacken the world's skies? And now, with the sinister company of terrorism and organized crime? Few answers. It has been said that the reason international organism has not succeeded is due to the lack of a coercive force needed to make countries and parties respect their principles and resolutions. It may be so, but we cannot continue invocating the rationality of the force. Neither should justify a totalitarian exercise of the veto of a government before a general and just resolution. In my opinion, however, the reason for failure is embedded in the same declaration of principles that fails to clarify that the fundamental objective of society and of nations' unity is the protection, conservation, and celebration of life. In the historical moment of its birth, the United Nations prefer not to have that level of commitment. Therefore, I don't understand proclaiming peace without the promise to remove all type of armaments that threaten life. I don't affirm that it was hypocrisy, but it was turning international policies into an art of diplomatic dissimulation. It's like fighting an illness without declaring that medicine and prescription drugs are a product of a shared necessity and not only a matter of patents. The same could be said of any law that enforces market prices and profits instead of protecting lives. It's time that we engage in a serious conversation about how to eliminate the visible and invisible walls of the world, which will allow us to balance our planet. A new world order is needed, one that inspires us once again and that revitalizes our United Nations organizations, one able to resuscitate the ideals of the Genesis with a pragmatic force that the challenge of the present time demands. The United Nations urgently need a profound restructure of its form and contents, and it should be done as soon as possible. Today, I am speaking not of a new correlation of forces, not a new balance of power, but a new law, a new set of rules for a new world. Every nation in the world, weak or strong, should commit their full effort to achieve that goal. A good beginning could be to remember that our common ground, the common ground of humanity, is our life, is biology, which is fundamental for a new world. Discussing the biology of our planet goes far beyond the discussion of unconnected programs. And the next one, please. The discussion should envision biology as a tool, an instrument to create a new society. Next one, please. Molecular biology brought the growth of biotechnology in many wealthy nations. Biotechnology competes with other industries in those countries, including armament. It is time that biology, next one, becomes a universal domain and that we start to discuss a bio-society. Next one. Therefore, I proposed that the New World Order be based on 3 pillars. Next one, please. Biology, international laws, and global economy. Biology. From those 3 pillars, I would argue that in this millennium, biology needs to come first. We need to understand and obey the laws of the universe in order to preserve life and health of our planet. A biological perspective that changes our anthropocentric civilization towards a biosociety. International law. The laws and rules, in order to be just, should respect the loss of life. We need to use all of our diplomatic expertise to create these new laws and regulations subordinated to the loss of life. They must guarantee that they will be put into practice, obeyed, and respected. Third one is global economy. In order for economy to be effective, it should be global. To be global, economy needs to respect the laws of the planet. Laws of life prevail over economic laws. Life is the more precious gift in the universe, more precious than peace, more precious than liberty and health. People fighting for peace, for liberty, and for health without fighting for life doesn't make any sense. When biology is the fundamental principles of the society of nations, then the absurd economic figures that I'm going to mention will be indefensible by any law or economical treaty. Until now, international law and economy has ignored the biology of the planet. This ignorance allows the existence of strong links between open and concealed violence. The world's wealth is estimated to be $30 to $50 trillion. More than half belongs to 5 countries of the 192 nations of the world. More than 75% of that wealth belongs to 15 nations. By contrast, the World Health Organization has a total biannual expenditure of all of its agencies and programs of $15 billion, is to say, an infinitesimal fraction of the world's wealth, remembering the system of Leibniz, or by any system. In reality, it corresponds to something between 50 cents to $2 per capita for every inhabitant of the world every 2 years. The United Nations has an operant expenditure of $1.9 billion. The total global expenditure of all of its agencies is $27 billion. It corresponds to $4 per capita. The world's military expenditure reached the chilling figure of $1.5 trillion, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. In other words, 2.4% of the world's wealth. It corresponds to an annual expenditure of $270 per capita. But let's be fair and recognize the efforts that we have made. That's one, please. During the difficult 1970s, 2 important resolutions were made. That's one. The first was the constitution of the Official Development Assistance Project. That's one, please. The ODA, and the resolution of the UN General Assembly that consisted of having that the industrialized countries of the North contribute to 0.7% of their respective GDP to the developing poor countries. The second was, that's one, the declaration of Alma-Ata of the World Health Organization that proposed reaching the goal of health for all for 2000. Unfortunately, by 2000, not much of these resolutions and goals were reached. A possible reason to consider for such a failure might be a sort of a shatterproof walls dividing or even isolating the concepts structuring the aforesaid resolutions. The division between the economic matters and social concerns rests on each side of the unbreakable wall, maybe because they were conceived as if they were two irreconcilable ideas appertaining to two independent projects. But the reality is that they need each other because they feed each other, and to think it otherwise reflects the fact that intentions and objectives remain disconnected, highlighting the world's schizophrenic personality. In search for the correction of these failures from year 2000, the world took new initiative grouped under the same 2 social and economic grounds. Next one, please. The Macroeconomy and Health Commission addressed the problem from both social and economic aspects. In the same year, 2000, the United Nations celebrated the Summit of the Millennium, in which the project MDG, Millennium Development Goals, was born and is supposed to be met by 2015. The United Nations calculated an annual MDG cost of $50 billion, which should be financed with funds provided mainly by the ODA program. It seems like a lot of money when compared to the annual budget of the UN, but it's nothing compared to what is spent in war. The ODA project, the recommendation of the Macroeconomy and Health Commission, and the MDG painfully fails today as we near the year 2009. The consensus of Monterrey has recognized the demand for industrialized countries to urgently fulfill their commitment. President Bush, however, refused to give 1 cent more than the 0.1% his government assigned to the ODA. The president of Venezuela, Chavez, at that time maintained his presence in the meeting, but warned of the need to keep these promises. The political walls started to grow tall in South America. The Mitsubishi Institute revealed in a study made public in 2003 that only 3.4% of the ODA project has been invested in health. I remind you that the average contribution of each country is around 0.2%. Recently, Japan decided to increase its contribution to the ODA, and the European Union decided to significantly increment the contribution of its countries, the newer ones in a lesser degree, in order to reach the 0.7% average by 2015, although some of its members will have to recognize surpass it, like Luxembourg, Norway, and Sweden. Nevertheless, 2/3 of the time period to have fulfilled the MDG has expired, and we can affirm that they will not be reached. A few goals have been met, but others have regressed. The registered progress is not uniform. There still exists disparity among countries and even within some. I think the absence of principles, the conceptual divorce, and the lack of funding are the roots of the problem. The paradox of our time is that while these dreams vanish, new nightmares arise together with the war, with terrorism and crime. I'm going to mention two of the new ones. They are fundamentally the marketing of medicines and migration problems. In 1995, World Trade Organization replaced the GATT and introduced new disciplines in the service sector and intellectual property, permitting the trade-related aspects of intellectual property, TRIPS, which relates to the innovation, production, distribution, and commercialization of pharmaceutical drugs and biological products. This created a very cruel monopolization of healthcare. If the WTO does not believe enough in life, they should at least realize that the decision to freely allow biological patents is against free trade. The migration problem deserves a lot of attention because the traffic of persons has become a modern slavery. The UN recommended some fast tracks for developed countries and some quick wins actions for developing countries in regard to the MDG, which I find very problematic to fulfill. At this point, we should ask ourselves how to face globalization. The United Nations needs to demand total disarmament without delay as an essential condition for peace. Additionally, we will recover that $1.5 trillion currently invested in weapons and redirect them toward the fulfilling of the objective of the millennium. The essential condition to end poverty in the world, which is the first objective of the MDG, is to have healthy men and women capable of transforming themselves into educated and productive citizens. Biology is the real and most solid substrate of the goals of the millennium. A fraction of the monumental and absurd arms budget should go to pure scientific research and its application in biotechnology. That will make the difference in the fulfillment of those objectives and goals. The government of the world, in particular those with a low gross domestic product, with poor human development index and high Gini index, should receive grants to enable them to direct needed research projects. We should also direct funds to multinational non-profit organizations, the United Nations and the World Health Organization. The world food production cannot survive with the financial misery that they receive in comparison to the insane expenditure on instruments of destruction. The production of pharmaceutical drugs should abandon its purely mercantile parameters which prevail in the present day. The funding for the innovation of new drugs should come from those $1.5 trillion if the world decides to say, like Hemingway, farewell to arms. Science and health are universal rights, but the spiraling increase of cost and the abuse of patents has made them merchandise items rather than human rights. This commercialized privileged access to healthcare led to the increase of the morbid mortality rate in marginalized sectors of the world. Poverty, disease, poverty is the vicious cycle of life and death in the underdeveloped world. It's true that the world has won many splendorous and epic battles in defense of life, defeating lethal infectious diseases. However, let me remind you the real reasons for those victories. Sulfates, a German discovery in the Bayer House, lead to the miraculous cure of President Roosevelt's son in 1936. Sulfates spread out their use against infectious disease without the barrier of patents and a very low cost. Exactly the same happened with penicillin, the drug of World War II. They used to sell it by pounds for a few dollars. Then again, with the polio vaccine, the poliomyelitis vaccine, that eradicated this pandemic from the world. When the legendary journalist Ed Morrow, famous for his anti-McCarthyism, asked Donald Salk, the creator of the polio vaccine, who will own the vaccine, Donald Salk answered, "Can anyone patent the sun?" Then streptomycin, developed from some microorganisms of the soil. Afterward, Waxman, its discoverer and developer, regretted having it patented and having yielded his right to a pharmaceutical company. Its cost became very economical and was very important in combating tuberculosis and many other infections. The gold fever and the ambition to make enormous profits from sick people was a lethal sickness that appeared to have arisen thereafter. Its most dangerous symptom was, and still is, the abuse of new drugs patents. In present day, genetic engineering broadens a horizon of hope, but also opens an abyss of inequality. Transnational companies want to patent life. If they patent DNA, they will own our body and our soul forever. We will surrender life, freedom, and dignity. Our job is to stop that from happening by discovering that biology is the most powerful link to unite all of the people of all nations. We must assign funds to study depth the biology of our planet, to conduct research, and to make biology and biotechnology our own for the people, to be the symbol of the planet, of the ecology, of a new biosociety. It is time to act immediately. If we do not hear the voice of life, the next generation will have to solve this enormous issue after having lost not only the respect for our generation, but also having lost an incalculable amount of lives. Let me summarize my proposal of 3 pillars. Next one, please. Biology is the first. I would like to comment 5 aspects of it. Number 1, next, call for total disarmament. Number 2, life is not patentable. The UN should establish the safeguards according to the TRIPS and to take in consideration every point of the Declaration of Doha. Next. Number 3, scientific research. The UN should allocate funding to all of the world's universities for research projects. The universities of poor countries should be financed and technically assisted in order to carry out research, especially in biology and biotechnology. For one is migration. The migrant has full human rights. Indentured servitude should be criminalized. The current inhumane treatment of migrants is comparable only to our past history of slavery. That's one. Number 5 is Millennium Development Goals. I propose, as a result of this event, the creation of a group designed to monitor and periodically report the accomplishment of the MDG on part of the UN and on part of these country members. Next one. International law. The first law should be that life is inviolable. Neither law nor international treaty can contradict the laws of nature and the laws of life. Next one. Global economy. The nation's economy is inextricably linked to the planet's wealth, production, distribution, and sustainable development of land, seas, fresh water, clean air, irrigation system, grasslands, minerals, men, and their ability to organize the economy without destroying nature. Elinor Ostrom recently received the Nobel Prize in Economy for her contribution to the understanding of the problem of governance of the commons. According to Elinor Ostrom, to manage common resources is a valid option for common people, even where government control or privatizations are other options. What is absolutely certain is that some resources are necessary common goods. There cannot be private ownership of the oceans, rivers, aquifers, climate, clean air, public health, and above all, biology can and should be managed cooperatively. There is an additional reason for biology to be the livelihood of the new world order. The 20th century saw the emergence of nuclear physics, thus crystallizing the scientist's dream that physics is the vehicle that drives the world to modernity and human welfare. But that original idea diverted, and nuclear physics became a weapon of mass destruction and remains as the greatest threat to end the world. In the 21st century, molecular biology emerges with the highest life expectancy for the eradication of many old and new diseases. It reminds us of the nuclear physics of the 20th century. But likewise, molecular biology may be the nightmare of the century in the lands of terrorists, of simple merchants. Biology, universal science, should be adopted as a universal principle capable of becoming an ecumenical doctrine. Biology is also the priceless opportunity to recover our moral integrity, invoking a total commitment to life. This could be the first time the people of the world are being asked to defend themselves in cooperation. This is the first time in which there is no enemy. There are not people against people. There are no rivalries of one religion to another, of ecologists against oil-producing countries. This is a proposal to all nations, to any current of system, whether free enterprise, socialist, communist, republics, kingdoms, communities, or just people wishing a profound transformation of their life. Yes. Having said that, I rest my case, and I thank you, and I pray to have had enough wisdom to get into your minds and into your hearts.